News Today's Talk.
640 Toronto.
What a great day for Talk Radio. I want to talk about something that I was really surprised to find out. According to certain studies from the Vanier Institute and a law firm here in town, people in committed relationships with more than one partner, it's called polyamory, polyamorous relationships. 1 in 5 Canadians is involved in such. I thought, boy, that's inordinately high. But let's find out about it because it has legal implications or ramifications, whatever the case may be. And the law, family law, isn't necessarily geared to protecting people if an issue should arise. Child support, maybe some kind of spousal support as well. Alyssa Bach is an associate lawyer with Shulman Partners LLP, and she is all over this issue. Alyssa, it's good to have you here on the Oakley Show. Good afternoon.
Good to be here.
Alyssa, let's start with this 1 in 5 stat. I mean, can you substantiate that? As I said, it seems inordinately high to me.
Yeah, understandable. So that was a report that was completed by the Vanier Institute, and that was updated as of May 2024. And based on their research, the statistics were showing that there had been an increase and that their study showed that 1 in 5 people had practiced consensual non-monogamy, which by definition would then be polyamory.
Yeah, I think the key word there is consensual non-monogamy. Otherwise, you're cheating. You got several partners. I mean, a lot of people involved in that. But consensual, so all parties know about the other or the others. And therefore, is that legal to do, by the way, in this country?
Yeah, so there's no rules in Canada against being in a consensual non-monogamous relationship. Where we see it in family law developing is that the laws surrounding things like spousal support don't necessarily match the definitions that you would have for, say, a polyamorous relationship.
So the law's got to catch up with this new reality is what you're saying.
Yeah, especially when we're looking at, say, somebody's engaged in a polyamorous relationship and they are financially dependent on their co-partners. They leave that relationship and are in need of support, which in Ontario we call spousal support. And they decide to seek that support from one or more of their partners, and they're bringing it into the court and trying to say, well, look, this person was my spouse, and therefore I'm entitled to support from them. And the other person says, whoa, wait a minute, we weren't spouses, we were roommates, for example. And if you've got this change in narrative after the fact, that's where you can have barriers, because now post-relationship, if the definition of the relationship isn't confirmed and you're trying to say that you're a spouse entitled to support, tons of complications that could come up.
Yeah, for example, you've got a conjugal relationship or a marriage, which is defined as living 12 months or more with somebody. And if you've got 2 or 3 or 4 more of these individuals residing under the house and you're one happy family, as it were, could any of those people then, by way of maybe being told you're not welcome here anymore in this arrangement, sue for spousal support?
Yeah, so in Ontario, when we're looking at the definition of a common law spouse, any 2 persons who are not married together and have cohabited for not less than 3 years, or a relationship of some permanence with a child, they are a spouse that could be entitled to support. So when we look at a polyamorous relationship, if by definition they are in a conjugal relationship for not less than 3 years, maybe it was with 2 people, they could make that claim against either of the 2 people that they were in the relationship with, or both. And we don't have the case law that would support that. And so they're kind of making this novel argument to the court to say, well, I am a spouse, and assuming the court can find that they're a spouse, they would be entitled. But what we want to avoid is this change in the definition of the relationship after the fact.
Again, Alyssa Bach is with us, associate lawyer with Shulman Partners LLP, on the issue of polyamorous relationships and what the legal implications might be if the situation changes or the arrangement changes. And so are you advocating then that you have some, dare I call it a prenup or some kind of written legal document, and would the courts recognize it as legally binding if you set down some of the rules of engagement in your relationship?
Yeah, so what we would encourage, and this is for any person who's in a relationship, not just polyamorous relationships, but the benefit of having a cohabitation agreement that's going to outline the rights and obligations of partners is to avoid the disputes that come up after. And where it becomes more prevalent is in something like a polyamorous relationship where you don't want to have to argue over whether or not you were or were not spouses. You could enter into an agreement where it's very clear that there are multiple spouses in the relationship, and should entitlements be met at the time of separation, spousal support would be on the table. That's something that can help clear up those unknown aspects of being in that type of relationship, or avoid the fight down the road in trying to prove all of the aspects without having it clearly defined at the outset.
What about the division of property? If it comes to, let's say, the dissolution of the arrangement, if your name's not on the title, do you still have a legal claim?
So in Ontario, we do have certain common law rights to property. If somebody's name is not on title, but they have contributed to either the purchase price or made contributions that have increased the equity in the property, they may be able to make a claim against that property. And that would apply whether they are spouses or not spouses. And typically in a cohabitation agreement, you would outline what people's rights are to property. People are not inherently entitled to somebody else's property that they are not entitled to, but if they have made specific contributions to it, they could have entitlements.
You know what I'm curious about? I mean, if this is legal and we're seeing an increase in the number of people in these arrangements, I mean, whatever happened to the accusation of bigamy or, Mormons having more than one wife? I mean, it seems now like the floodgates have opened and everything is now redefining the family.
Yeah, and this is something that if we look back in history, the amount of times that the law has had to play catch up, right, where it used to be that women couldn't apply for divorce except for in specific situations. And then it was that it had to be two people of different genders or sex that had to be in a relationship. And so the law has had to evolve as society has evolved. And so that's something that we just see it constantly playing catch up to come to terms with what is reflective of current society.
Okay. With the law playing catch up, are you saying then as certain cases get adjudicated, it's almost writing the law, the precedent is being established as we speak in real time?
Yeah, it's always updating, and that's something with family law continuously because every family is unique. Every situation is very particular to the needs of that family, the children. So as much as we have the law that gives us the framework, the application of the law is to that particular fact scenario. So having clarity at the outset is what assists people in avoiding the long, contentious litigation of separation when people aren't always on their best behavior. So having that at the outset cleared up can make things smoother down the road.
Sure. Like one partner couldn't necessarily accuse the other of estrangement of affection or adultery because if it was already set out in advance and this was the arrangement, then you knew what you were getting into, correct?
Correct. So as much as adultery is a grounds for divorce, that could be something that if it's defined within your relationship, that you know that you're engaged in a polyamorous relationship, that would take something like adultery off the table for specific areas of the conjugal relationship.
What about child support if you've got non-biological children that have been brought into this polyamorous relationship? I mean, these are all X's in the equation or, these various factors that weigh in. I mean, it could get to be, pretty messy to untangle, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's where, even in our legislation as it is, a parent includes a person who has demonstrated a settled intention to treat a child as a child of his or her family. And so that could be a very broad definition. And child support, I would say, is one of the areas of the law that the courts are very much, it's the right of the child. And if somebody is defined as a parent, they're going to have support obligations. And it's less of a concern that, oh, but if you have multiple parents, then would you ever have too much support? No, a child's going to have the support that they need. And if you have been a parent, there's going to be potential support obligations there.
Maybe you can shed some light on this, because there was a story out of Newfoundland back in 2018, and there were 3 unmarried adults who were the legal parents of a child that was born to a polyamorous family. Can you give us a synopsis real fast?
So it's a case from Newfoundland, and in that situation where we had 2 men in a relationship with the mother of a child, and the court recognized those unmarried adults as the legal parents of the child. And so there were both parenting orders and support orders that were tied to that particular situation. And so we're seeing it in different courts. There are some cases that have come out in British Columbia as well. And so this is where it's that the courts are taking the legislation that they have, and they're working with that to make sure that the rights of spouses and children are still being met. But it's not as clear from the legislation alone. So it does require having that analysis after.
Wow, we're quite some way from the nuclear family. I had no idea that we had come to this point, but polyamorous relationships, as the study cites, 1 in 5 people involved in such. I thought that was high, but nonetheless, it's the legal implications that we've been addressing here with Alyssa Bach, associate lawyer with Shulman Partners LLP, who have delved into this as an area of their practice. I appreciate your time and explanations this afternoon, Alyssa.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.